quite the angle, isn't it? This is where my microphone is. Hello. It's just after 6. It's very nice out. It's a hot day, but not humid, which I appreciate. Lots of birds out. Lots of birds singing and chirping and calling. I was thinking earlier about some movies that I've been meaning to watch. Movies that I anticipate house similar feelings and themes to some novels I'm writing. I love when media crosses one another in terms of inspiration. Books indicate movies, indicate video games, indicate music, how it all kind of relates to one another because they're all ultimately the same thing, art, whether it's being commodified, expedited, and quality may be compromised for some for the sake of easy surface level enjoyment. I think there's a place for that sort of thing. I'm certainly not someone who abstains from that entirely. I like to balance that, I think. I like interacting with creations that make me think, make me feel, ideally make me do both. Some of the ones on this particular list I was working on, I've obviously never seen any of these, so they might not be quite on the mark for comps, but I find it's things that you wouldn't even think. Movies you might watch or books you might read that seem unrelated to something you yourself are creating. But even if it is very different, it can awaken things in you. And in turn, I think everything you bring in influences what you put out. So maybe you want to be more careful about what you bring in. But I think for me, I'd rather just take in whatever it is that's calling to me. And if that influences what I put out, I don't see it as tainting or mutilating. It's kind of just like a fingerprint. It's like putting a little bit of, I don't know how to put it, like it sheds its energy. Shedding sounds like a, not quite the right word because it sounds like something you wouldn't necessarily want or like, but it imprints itself, its memory, its presence, its essence, whatever the case. I think that's important. So like I was saying, the ones on this particular list, I will admit some of these are just because I am fascinated by the people involved in the film, actors on the screen, but in part because of what I've seen them in otherwise. So the first one on the list is Mayday. I know that it has Mia Goth in it. I know that I think it's a movie people recognize as making little sense, and I am finding myself increasingly drawn to stories that people classify as making little sense because I've been reading stories and things, watching movies that people have described as such, and I find it discouraging sometimes, or I don't know if discouraging is the right word, maybe just even just frustrated seeing people take in these pieces of media and writing them off as confusing or no plot, just vibes or whatever the case. And maybe they'll even give it 5 stars. They'll say they love it, but they don't know why they love it. They're like, it doesn't make any sense, but I had a great time. And I think it's unfair to that piece of art if you don't try to understand even a little. I made a video kind of recently talking about some of the books I was reading. One of those books was Brutes by Diz Tate. I might have talked a bit about this a little bit in that video, I don't even recall. But I know I remember feeling that way. I didn't really pin down the feeling right away, but as I was cogitating and thinking about it after finishing it, I know that I did feel that way in some capacity. Just frustrated that people didn't seem like some people were even really trying to understand. So I felt like that reading Brutes. My brother actually recommended me Angel's Egg, an animated film that came out, I believe, in the even the 80s, maybe? It's a peculiar film. There's not much of a plot. It's about a little girl who carries a big egg in this large, seemingly lost to time city. Very beautiful, very unnerving, and for the most part, it just follows her as she cradles this egg. She doesn't know what's inside of it. Not really, but she takes care of it like it's her own. She treasures it and values it. Soon a young man, boy, comes into the picture and he joins her on her going about. And they converse minimally, but when they do, it's interesting. Anyway, I watched it on BitChute because I couldn't find it anywhere else to watch it. Anyway, I felt like that with that movie. Also, people who wouldn't even try to understand what they're seeing. And I think a piece of media doesn't have to just mean one thing, and it doesn't even have to mean what the creator initially imbued into it. That can be a meaning, but I think as an individual person, you have the authority to imbue meaning in things, and it will be skewed to your perspective. I don't know if skewed is the right word so much as cultivated to match wherever you are at. It's very interesting. So, more recently, I've been very conscious of being conscious. I have a reading journal where mostly I just kept a list of all of the books I read, but didn't tend to write much about the books I read, which is funny because it's a reading journal. But more recently, I have made a point to write something about what I'm reading, even if I don't immediately have something to say. I ask myself what I thought, not just wait for myself to overflow onto the page. I actually force myself, not in a bad way, just take a moment to be like, well, what did you think? What did it make you feel? And try to quantify that. Anyway, I keep getting sidetracked. Mayday is the first on the list. The Sweet East, released in 2023. Greener Grass, released in 2019. I think this is a lot more offbeat and maybe a little zany than the other ones on the list. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't even seen the trailer for any of these films. Marrowbone, 2017. I really am drawn to the cast of this film, and I'd really like to watch it. The Stepford Wives, 1975. I read the book last year, and it was very good, very intriguing. Um, I was enthralled and horrified and felt seen in a way, and also frustrated. It's very haunting and very good. So I wanted to see the film of it, but I still haven't watched it yet. It's been on my list for a while. Um, Another one that's quite different than the other ones I've mentioned so far, Donkey Skin. I started watching this movie a very, very long time ago. Many, many, many years ago. I wanted to watch more films that seemed obscure and odd and strange to me at the time, but I didn't really know where to start. At the time, I was convinced I was going to be a musician in a band, that I would write incredible music with thought provoking thematic elements, and that I would tour the world. I didn't really take into account that I am a very quiet, reserved, person. Ultimately, as I moved through my teenage years, I left that dream behind. But I do still write. I just write in a different capacity now. But at the time, I was very focused on the visuals of what I wanted the listener of certain music I wanted to write to visualize. And I think I came across frames of donkey skin, probably on Pinterest, and it evoked something in me, and so I tried to watch the film. It's a French film. It's a children's movie, I believe, where I, a princess, I believe, is, I think she may be forcibly engaged to a man she is not interested in by her father, and so she runs away. And I believe she wears some sort of mask, a donkey head or something. I'm not exactly sure. There is a fairy godmother like figure in the story. I remember I got far enough in watching it to remember when the girl, princess, comes into contact with her. She comes through the ceiling, and the ceiling is, I don't remember what it was made out of, but just something about the way the woman came through the ceiling. It was a very evocative visual, and it stuck with me. And I believe when she exited the scene, they had the same clip in reverse, if I recall correctly. It was so long ago. But I think I want to find that film again and watch it in full this time. So that one's quite a bit different than the other ones I mentioned, but it's in line to some degree to a different story, one of the several stories that I'm presently writing. Another one on the list is Badlands, released in 1973. I'm not sure how I first heard about this, probably on Letterboxd in some capacity on a list or a related similar film or something like that. I've seen people talk about it. Several people mention it as favorite movies, like the Letterboxd for favorite videos, things like that, I believe. It just looks very interesting to me. I also put Heavenly Creatures, 1994, which I know has Kate Winslet in it. I feel as though perhaps Melanie Linsky is in it, but I can't quite recall. I'm not sure. Another film, Girlfriends, released in 1978. This one also fascinates me. It seems very similar to Frances Ha. I loved Frances Ha. It's very sad, depending on if you can relate to it. And I think this movie is kind of like a spiritual predecessor to it in a way. The final one on this particular list is The Florida Project, 2017. I think I had wanted to watch it a long time ago, but it escaped me at some point or other. But it is a comp for Brutes, which I found interesting, and I did like Brutes. On the reverse side, I do have a couple of more. I've been asked many times in my life if I watch anime. I guess I give off that vibe, but I've never really gotten into it. My brother watches a lot of anime, and it's become a little bit of a bonding point for us. I watch One Piece with him on occasion. And like I said, he's the one who recommended me Angel's Egg. He's also recommended Berserk, things of that nature. I'm a little afraid I want to guard myself in some ways. I don't believe in watching something that's disturbing just for the sake of being disturbing. But if it has a point, then I do think there's value there. I do intend to watch it at some point. I'm just, I don't know. It's on pause for the moment, but some other ones I have on my list. Perfect Blue, released in 1997. I feel as though many people refer to this movie and love it, and it seems interesting. I also have Ghost in the Shell, released in 1995, and Neon Genesis Evangelion? 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 I don't know. 1997. It seems like there's a little bit of some cyberpunky kind of things, at least I think with Ghost in the Shell. I'm not precisely certain. But I was discussing with my brother, I think it's very interesting the media that came out in the 90s. The 90s are such an interesting decade to me because for me, born in 2003, it's just out of reach enough that there's something very romantic about that. But then it's also near enough that it's just out of reach. You know what I mean? It's at a point in time where culture and technology were on the brim of what we know it to be today, but it also has enough of a world that existed before the world we know today for it to be very alluring, something to ache for, which I feel I have. Anyway, sorry yap a lot over here. These are just some things I've had on my mind. I do want to finish the drafts of stories I'm working on. I have one novel that I started a year and a half ago, maybe. I never finished it. I'm between 60 and 70,000 words on it, I believe. After many, many spurts on and off working on it. And I'm in the third act. It's in the final stretch, I'm in the finale. And I think part of me fears finishing it, even though I know that it's nowhere near finished. The kind of writer I've been, at least for a while now, since I started attempting writing novels, is I've been very much an underwriter. I want to get the bones of it down first. I want to understand what it is I'm working with because I do have a very limited scope of what I want a story to be when I start. That doesn't necessarily mean I just know the very beginning. I could know things I want to happen later or even in the end, but I just need to fill in a lot of gaps. So I like to get the framing in place. And while I'm in that process, a lot of times I find ideas I had initially don't even really work. So for me, novel writing is very much a journey. Even for a first draft, a draft to me so sparse and so needing work that I like to refer to them as zero drafts. Whatever the case, my one project Hometown, that's the one I'm referring to now. It's one I've not been able to really think of very good comps for. I can't quite pin down the tone of it enough to explain it to another person who doesn't feel it in their soul the way I do. And even with that one, it's changed a lot from what I initially thought it was going to be. So it almost feels like reverse engineering to try and find comps for it because I'm still trying to figure out what exactly it is. But there's that one. There's another story, Project Apothecary. I only wrote 10,000 words for that during the last NaNoWriMo. Rest in peace, by the way. But not really. They had it coming with the way they were conducting things. Yeah. That one, I think, is one that Donkey Skin could also apply to. I have a whole other list on Letterboxd that I started cultivating. A private one. Lots of films from the 60s and 70s. Odd, ethereal, horrifying kinds of stories. Kind of a folk horror tint, but fairy tales are very relevant to that particular story. Cults, young sisterhood, youth, and beauty, what purity means, things of that nature. That one, it's interesting because right away, as soon as I started working on that story this past November, immediately there were external forces coming in on me. All of this thinking and pondering and hurting based on things that were going on in the world outside of me, around me, and it was kind of closing in on me as I was trying to create this new thing, something from a small seed of something else. That it's like what I was saying, how all sorts of things can come together to create something else. And for me, the present state of the world and things going on in my own life, feelings I was having, hurts I was just experiencing, it made it difficult to write the story because I was too raw, I think. Too raw, too hurt and confused to really say what I wanted to say. Because I didn't even know what I wanted to say just yet. I was still reacting. I do want to work on that one again. Some stories that I loved that have kind of helped shape what I want that story to be are Rouge by Mona Awad. That was my favorite book I read last year. The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin, another one of my favorites from last year. Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I only read and watched Gone Girl last year for the first time. Of course, there were things I knew about it because there are things you can't really have escaped after this long. Those were some of the big ones. I have some other ones that I want to read that I know are going to put my thinking and feelings in certain places that are going to evoke things from me, if that makes sense. I like to read these books or watch these movies not because I want to copy what they're doing or not even to take notes from what they're doing to improve on what I'm doing, because I know it's going to evoke something in me that's going to get those thoughts and feelings flowing. If that makes sense, it touches on particular topics or soft spots, things of that nature. But that's just one, another story I'm working on. I want to finish the hometown one, the first draft of it, before I start diving into Project Apothecary, this other one I'm talking about. And then I have another fantasy story, Project Assassin, which I've been working on for many, many years. And it has seen many iterations, and I think it will see many more to come. Like I had said, being afraid with the one that I'm in the third act of, afraid to finish it. That's, I think, how I feel a little bit with the Assassin one, Project Assassin, which, yeah, I know once I finish a draft of any of these novels, that doesn't mean anything, because I finished a draft of the Assassin one, but it is so far from where I want it to be. So there's no real completion in just a single first draft. At least not for me. It's just a step. Mostly at the moment I am in input mode. I feel it's very important to always be importing and always be exporting in some capacity, but I think it makes sense for there to be times where you may be taking in more or times where you'll be putting out more. And right now, and for a while, I've been in an absorbing phase, trying to read stories I never would have read before, things I come across in thrift stores that seem interesting to me, things that I've never heard of, I've never heard anyone talk about, and spend my time with them completely unaware of what someone else might think of that thing. Have it untainted. Because I do think other people can taint your perspective on something. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. Maybe when you're first taking something in, I think having your own experience with it is important. At least for me. I don't know what it is like for everyone else, and I'm not going to tell anyone how they should do anything. For me, the way I've been doing things this year is very different from the way I've done things before. But as focused as I have been on import, taking things in, inputs, things of that nature, I have been also focused a lot on exports, but not in the same way I would have thought. Poetry has been something that's crept up on me, and sometimes I hear myself talking about this or reading back on things I write about this. I'm like, my God, she's pretentious. But I'm so glad because I spent all of my life always hoping to be pretentious. I've always wanted to be someone who is so, I don't know, unafraid of their own thoughts and their own feelings and being able to express them without concern for what other people might think about that. I feel I've always been very limiting towards myself because I've always been very conscious of putting up a certain image or certain face, and not so much because I want other people to like me or I want to fit in with other people, more so because I wanted to like me. I wanted to be this idealized version I always hoped I could be. I wanted to be the cool girl who reads the cool books and listens to the cool music. And that was very hard for me because I was doing all the things that I thought was cool, not the things that felt cool. I don't know, that sounds silly, but I had to remind myself that who I am is not necessarily what I think I should have been for so long. Who I am is all of the parts of me that I don't tell other people about, all of the parts that I don't show, all of the parts that are embarrassing or cringy that I wouldn't want people to know because that would taint this cool version that I'm trying to put out. That's what I really am. And when I reminded myself that I do know who I am, it's just not who I'm pretending I am. Who I'm pretending I am is not who I really am. When I really let myself realize that, it was very freeing. And I don't feel nearly as belittling of my own self as I once did. So, if someone were to hear me talking about thoughts and feelings and honoring art and all of these things I've been saying of late, if someone hears that and rolls their eyes, fair. Um, but I'm also glad that this is where I'm at. And maybe it is just a temporary thing, I don't know. But to me, it feels like an accomplishment. It feels hard won. And that's another thing, like what I just said. It may not be forever. It may just be a moment in time. And I'm reminding myself that everything is just a chapter in the story of our lives. Nothing tends to truly be permanent. Things change often, for better or for worse. And I think it's important to be open to that. And I think openness is really one of the main themes of my story of this year, if that makes any sense. Being willing to let in new things, new energies, new thoughts, new feelings, etc., etc., and releasing this version of myself that I've chased endlessly, fruitlessly, and just accept who I am, where I am, and not just accept, but celebrate it. And if that makes me obnoxious and pretentious, and like the people that I'm like, hear them talk, I'm like, oh my god, who let them talk? Then I'm sorry, but this is where I am at the moment. And I think everyone should be allowed to be at least a little bit annoying at some point in their life. It's just kind of like a necessity, I think. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The ability to be annoying is like paramount. So Poem Crazy was one of the books that I read that I'd never heard of and read completely on my own without any outside perspective until after I finished it and after I'd started forming my own thoughts. Then I went to see what other people thought. I did that with Poem Crazy. I did that with a book I just finished reading a few days ago, Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. Another one I hadn't heard of until I thrifted it randomly. And the one I'm currently in the middle of, Ellen Foster by Kay Gibbons. It's Oprah's book club, so it's clearly not obscure, but I've never heard of it. I picked it up because Ellen Foster is a Southern Holden Caulfield, tougher perhaps as funny, a breathtaking first novel. Now, if anything is being compared to Holden Caulfield, Catcher in the Rye, Salinger, etc., even though the only Salinger novel I have read is The Catcher in the Rye. I did start Franny and Zoe, but I did not finish it. Not because I didn't love it, because I truly did, and it took me by surprise how much I enjoyed it. I just got distracted. I do have to say, on the first page, I think there's a microaggression. So that's interesting. I'm not very far, only a couple of chapters. But we'll see. So those are some thoughts about inputs and outputs and comps and yada yada yada, more than anyone probably was warranting or bargaining for. Patrick Stump could never. Or Pete Wentz, he's probably the one who wrote it. I don't know. I'm about to have some changes in my life. And they're changes I've looked forward to. But there are also changes that I anticipate are going to bring on things that I will tire of soon. Okay, this is just about to die, so I have to end this now. So I don't know. Alright, well, you'll just have to accept this audio recording of me and whatever it is I decide to put up on the screen. Like I was trying to say, I don't know what the newest chapter of my life holds for me, but I'm happy in this moment, and I've been happy in many moments for a while, and I think I will still to come. Thank you for watching if you did. I appreciate it. Feel absolutely free to share any of your own thoughts, feelings, experiences, reactions to anything I'm saying, or anything else at all. I've spent a lot of time alone lately, and it's very healing, very important to me and my well-being, and this is something I know about myself as a person. A lot of time alone is not only fine for me, I think it is good for me, and it is something I have a lot of, and I feel blessed in that, but I do understand no man is an island, as they say, and I do realize I have to value I do value outside perspectives a lot. I do truly very much. So I don't want to stop doing that. Okay, this is not so short of an outro. Thank you again for watching. Share your thoughts if you would like. Stay tuned for my next yapping session, I guess.